History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to give you a damn good thrashing. Finally, my stupidity pays off. I don't believe it.
But one man rises above them all.
What just happened? Good evening and welcome to the very first edition of What Just Happened. The theme of tonight's show, in fact the theme of pretty much every show we do, will be stuff that makes me mad. And the stuff that makes me mad is mad stuff. And here's something that is totally insane, right in the midst of British society, that nobody ever thinks to particularly question. It's called the BBC licence fee. Absolutely insane, anachronistic, crazy. They charge us 159 quid a year to watch stuff like Strictly Come Dancing and Question of Sport and Top Gear. I mean, why are we paying 159 quid for that? The state should not be charging us to watch television. This is supposed to be a free society, not North Korea. But we have to pay this £159 if you want to watch the BBC, because if you don't, you could end up in jail. How crazy is that? That's not insane at all, is it? Every year, the BBC takes at least 50,000 people to court for not paying their TV licence, for not handing over their 159 quid for Strictly Come Dancing, Question of Sport and all that stuff. Every year. It's anachronistic, it's mad, it's crazy. We've got to stop, we've got to take a stand. This show, tonight, is going to call for, right now, an end to this absolutely insane thing called the BBC licence fee. I wouldn't mind if the BBC sort of remotely entertained me, you know, I don't know, once a month. You know, if it's comedy, I don't know, ever made me even smile. When was the last thing you saw anything funny on the BBC, apart from the news? Pretending it's not biased. What a joke that is as well. Just a bunch of people who went to Oxford and Cambridge and private schools lecturing us about what we should think, about how wrong we were to vote Brexit. It's pathetic, it's ridiculous. In the old days, right, in this country, the unfairness was based around this, that all the rich robber barons bought up all the land and they charged people like you and me, the serfs, big taxes. That's how they got their money. So what do the elite do now? They join the BBC and they charge us 159 quid a year so they can pay each other thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds. Some of the salaries in the BBC are just absurd, just absurd. You know, £300,000, you know, 350 grand a year for being director of vision or something. What does that mean? What does that mean? We're being conned. Have you ever been conned? Because you are being conned. This has got to end. No more BBC licence fee. Get rid of it now. Let's start the show. And joining me tonight is Mark Saggers, TalkTV legend, legendary sports broadcaster for many, many years. Sky Sports, TalkSport, you name it. He's been there, done that. And also the Sun's brilliant TV critic, Ali Ross, the only man who ever wrote a column funnier than me. And Sags, of course, is the only man in the world who's actually angrier than me about everything. So, boys, I made my feelings plain about the ludicrous BBC licence fee. What are your feelings about it, Ali?
Just the same as yours, really.
Okay, thanks,
a little more sane.
A little more sane.
A few less arm movement, but generally along the same lines. We've got this till 2027, supposedly, because I don't know if you remember, Nadine Dorries promised us that once we get to 2027, we'll have to find a new way of funding it. But at some point in between then, Labour wins an election, comes in and says, do you know what? I think we quite like the licence fee after all.
Yeah.
So we're probably stuck with it. Yeah. But as you said, it is completely anachronistic. It grows arms, legs, feet, different heads. It's now, as well as being a broadcaster, it's a publisher. No one ever ran this past me and said, you know what, we're going to put newspapers out of business as well.
Yes.
And we're going to hire a completely different bunch of staff for this. It's not going to be the same people who you see on television, because, you know, they do enough as it is. We're just going to get a whole new level of management, staff, reporters, and we're going to take all this news from local newspapers, and frankly, what happens to them is none of our business, because we're raking in £3.5 billion a year. Who's going to challenge this?
Yeah.
Absolutely no one. And it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, that's the thing I should have mentioned in my mad rant, that all of us giving them £159 a year, Mark, adds up, as Ali quite rightly said, to an astonishing £3.5 billion a year. And the BBC always complains about not having enough money. And the reason they complain about that, as I mentioned, is because they're paying each other about 600 grand a year each. It's
so ridiculous. I can tell you, I never saw any of that 600 grand a year, and I started this career in local radio, who've been ruined by the BBC as much as anything else. A decent way for local radio to exist and still should do properly, but they're about to cancel that again for about the fourth time, because all of those that sit in BH or some that went to Manchester, not one person who went to Manchester, the new studios for sport, for children's television and everything, that left London to go there, now works there. It is absolutely shameful. But more importantly than that, I'll just tell you a little story. So I worked for BBC Sport, and at a time when it was full of absolutely magnificent broadcasters. I have to say, you're Peter Jones, Brian Butler, Cliff Morgan, Tony Adamson. Cliff Morgan was my mentor. And in those early days, we're talking mid-80s here to start with.
Great rugby player in his day as well.
He was a great rugby player. And more than that, he was a great man and understood what the BBC should really be doing in those days. It has changed so much now. But on one occasion, I was called in to speak to the head of 5 Live, as it was then, about the expenses that I'd charged to go from White City to Wembley, which I did on 7 different occasions every year for FA Cups and what have you. And I used to jump
about 2 miles or something.
2 miles away. I used to jump on the bus, or I'd get the tube, because that was the way I've always done things. I've never bothered with all this car stuff and everything. And they said, well, we're a little concerned about some of your expenses. And I said, what do you mean you're concerned about my expenses? I said, I'm concerned you won't pay this Oyster card. They said, no, we certainly won't. We don't pay Oyster cards. You do know that you can have a chauffeur-driven car that will wait for you at Wembley for the duration of your programme, and then you can get it back.
It's much cheaper than an Oyster card.
The best bit about all of that, though, that Terry Wogan, who I worked with first time really, was at the 92 Barcelona Olympics. He would have none of this. He'd quietly, by that stage, actually bought the company that was doing all of the chauffeur driving. So he was making all this extra money off the BBC on the quiet. Yeah, don't blame him. But of course he'd had his room had been repainted in Barcelona, and there were different flowers and chocolates every day. He hated all of this side of the BBC, as many of us did at that stage. But what a waste of money. They've never stopped wasting the money. And the only thing they seem to be doing at the moment is, the beauty is, when you don't have to commercially worry, it's not about viewing and listening figures, it's about quality. But oh no, none of that. I see again, of course, that the latest Radio 2, great man to leave the stage, exit right before he should do, Ken Bruce. Yeah. So what they're basically doing is taking more money, reducing the audience, chasing a youth audience that will never, ever be part of the BBC, and why should it be? Not even understanding that radio itself is not listened to by anybody under the age of 35 anymore. Just get real or get out.
Exactly right. And this is the thing, isn't it, Ali, that these people, they take all of our money, and they are, as you were saying, they're the kind of enemies of commercialism. They don't like the private sector at all, hence their sort of aggressive land grab to nice little local newspapers who've been there for 150 years. The BBC, our state broadcaster, are putting out of business these local papers with their rubbish little local websites, etc., etc. That's what it's all about. And meanwhile, with all of this money that they aggressively put local businesses out of work with, they have no idea what kind of programmes we are interested in watching. As Mark quite rightly says, they're cocooned in their own privileged world of free money, and they don't have the commercial imperative, and therefore they don't have to make programmes that people particularly want, because they don't have to worry about getting advertising or subscriptions.
Go to any regional big city, like Glasgow, for instance. You drive along across the Kingston Bridge and you'll see a small building, and that's commercial television, and next to it is this thing that looks like Ceausescu's palace with a BBC flag.
Beaming glass towers.
And you think, wow, what quality of output they must be putting out. But you rarely see it on the screen, except, I would say, strictly, lovely production values on that. It's a marquee show. It's popular as well.
Yeah.
Happy Valley too.
Yeah, well, they have their moments still.
They have
but
their
they're getting
moments.
few and far between, aren't they?
Yeah. Other things, you look at it and think, hey, where is all this money going?
Do you remember a few years back when Mark Thompson was the Director General?
The jacuzzi of cash.
Yeah.
This is the man who described the licence fee as a jacuzzi of cash.
Jacuzzi of cash.
And then he got the job and he suddenly thought, actually, you know, it's all right. It's probably about fair.
It's not enough.
Could do with a bit more, actually.
3.5 billion, it's not enough.
Another jacuzzi.
And you know what they used to call it while he was in charge? Because he was all, you know, there was geographical correctness. Everything is political correctness, wokery there. You know, we all know about the absurd extent of that within the echelons of the state broadcaster. But, of course, in those days, it was geographical correctness. Yeah. And Mark and his acolytes were very keen on, you know, making sure the BBC was represented all across the country. So they start building these massive studios.
Yeah.
They spent £1 billion on their studio in central London alone. £1 billion. So it got called the British Building Corporation, which is, you know, that's what they do with our money. They don't know what to do with it. I heard a story about a BBC One controller who was taking over from another BBC controller. I could name names, but I better not. And the one who was taking over said, any advice? And the one who was leaving said, try and work out ways to get through the money, because you will find at the end of every year you will not have spent it all, and if you don't spend it all, we won't get any more. So you're going to find it difficult to get through all the money they give you. Not many broadcasters have that problem, Mark?
No, they don't. And of course, suddenly the BBC decided that they could have an international arm, BBC Worldwide, that they could actually charge people for to bring in extra cash. I have a very close friend of mine who was actually brought in as one of those to help. He has been a magnificent advertising executive around the world for many years. He lasted 3 weeks. He said, nobody here knows what they're talking about. They will just waste yet more people's money. Yeah. And that's exactly what they have continued to do. I mean, it was still all, you know, turning left instead of right on the planes for an awful long time. Hotels that certain stars used to not be happy with when you would get out there working, so they would then be checked into another hotel. I mean, the whole thing was largesse at its very worst.
You know what you were saying about your bus fares to Wembley and the absurd. Don't take a bus, but by all means take a chauffeur-driven limo. So I used to do a TV slot on one of the Radio 5, what the hell? And it was on a Tuesday afternoon. And when they
know this about you,
I used to live in America as well. Did you know about that? So I used to do it in Broadcasting House in London when it was in White City. And then, of course, Radio 5, along with lots of other elements of the BBC, moved up to Salford. Geographical correctness. It's cost us £1 billion.
In the year of the London Olympics, they went to move to Manchester.
Yeah. It's cost us £1 billion, but at least we're represented in the north. That's what people around the country go. They go, you know, they're all lying awake at night saying, I love all the programmes on the BBC, but is it representative regionally? Do they have enough studios in Leeds and Manchester? That's what we were all worried about, weren't we? No. Anyway, so I had to, instead of doing it down the line after they went to Salford, which I assumed I would, you know, it was 20 minutes. They said, oh, well, you know, do you mind getting a train up to Manchester? Every week, and we'll have a car waiting for you at Piccadilly Station, and then we'll whisk you to Media City. You know, so this is what happened to me every year. Me and another TV critic, we'd have to go to Euston.
I remember. I turned that gig down.
Yeah, you were wise enough to turn it down.
Regretting
so
it.
we had a 3-hour train journey to Manchester. limo waiting outside, into the limousine, rushing to Media City, up 4 flights of stairs, into the studio with Richard Bacon, and 20 minutes, straight back downstairs, into the limo, back to the station, back on the next train, back to Euston, and that cost a lot of money. Why? Well, sound quality's better if you're in the studio. I mean...
But at least you were regional, Kevin.
Yeah, but think of that. That is taking our money and, frankly, squandering it.
My really biggest bugbear is that they have money, but they use it in the wrong way.
Yes.
And they use it against things that actually work for them. And things that do work for them are things like local radio, like regional television. They have worked for the BBC in the past. They're basically non-existent now because they're just not allowed to do anything that they used to be able to do, which was to contact and connect with local people. And again, their audience was over 50 and 60. Some really decent broadcasters no longer allowed to broadcast to people in the area that they knew only too well. And yet again in the last year, they've gone, so not exactly network, but regional. Local radio, when you have to broadcast to people in all sorts of different parts of East Anglia, doesn't work. Most of their stuff doesn't work, and for that end, they should be told no longer. You've got to go out there, work alongside and against everybody else who has to find the money to get the figures.
And these job creation situations are so crazy. I remember a Director General not so long ago, who shall remain nameless, who created a lot of these sort of £350,000 a year jobs. No, people go, what are they? What's this job? Anyway, he created this job, Director of Vision. It was £370,000 a year for the Director of Vision. So I said to this Director General, I said, so this £370,000 a year job, Director of Vision, what do they do for this huge salary? He said, well, they're in charge of, like, planning for the future, you know, what the BBC is going to do in the future. You know, what we're planning to do in the next week ahead, the month ahead, the years ahead. I said, so what do you do then? You're the Director General. Do you not think at all of the future? Do you just sort of stay right in this present moment?
Just lives for the now.
Yeah. I've got to sort of appoint someone who knows something about a time that isn't right now. So it's just crazy. Well, absolutely mad.
They're supposed to be apolitical. They're not now. They're very left-wing. Whatever they want to say to us. I mean, they've drifted into this. They sort of got away with it. But they are supposed to be balanced. And there is no balance as far as I'm concerned. I don't know anybody anymore who actually really watches the news on the BBC as anything that is relevant. And the reason for that is because they only ever hear one side of everything.
And we've got to move on in a second, but they persuade themselves that BBC News is a bastion of impartiality. You know, so unbiased, it's unbelievable. Actually, the BBC News department covers a wide range of issues that are left-wing. But
it doesn't stop there. It goes through all the programme. You just need to watch EastEnders and know exactly... This is the BBC's flagship, so this is what they think. And we, famously, after the Brexit vote, it had an EU-themed night at the Queen Vic. This is an East End pub. This is a pub of their fantasy.
The EU night. EU night in an East End pub.
Well,
it's insanity.
They've created a world, their fantasy world, that doesn't actually exist. The Archers currently is consumed by woke storylines. And so you've got characters going, I really want to get this farm back to carbon net zero, but so many people seem to be railing against the very important environmental issues.
I'm going to say, though, I have listened to the Archers for 20 years.
Oh, and the
one thing I would say is that, of course, parts of it annoy me, but I do enjoy it. But I do have to say, right now, the issues that the programme is taking on are exactly those that they don't help anybody by presenting them that way. You suddenly just get lost, and at the end they'll say, if you're getting in any trouble about any of this, you can ring or look at the website or call the Samaritans.
If you've been affected by climate change...
You know, it's just absolutely ludicrous. Just let it be drama and do it properly and understand all of this side of things. But the BBC in itself should and is out of date and should be defunct. As far as I'm concerned, that's it. Forget it. Forget it as far as the money's concerned. We don't need them anymore. Why do we need them?
We don't need to pay them. Don't need to pay them. They can make their own programmes and stand on their own 2 feet. But unlike the BBC, we have to pay for TalkTV with commercials, and it's time for a commercial break.
On your last trip, did you discover what the Earth people eat? They eat a great many of these. They peel them with their metal knives. Boil them for 20 of their minutes. Then they smash them all to bits. They are clearly a most primitive people. For mash, get smash.
When you're a massive media star like you and I, and Ali as well, but he's clever enough not to be on social media, you don't necessarily get wall-to-wall compliments on Twitter and Facebook, do you? So I thought I might read out some of the rave reviews that I've been getting for some of my performances on here on TalkTV. Is Kevin O'Sullivan drunk on today's programme? He sounds like a 5-year-old. That's one of my better ones. What have we got here?
Did I write that?
Kevin O'Sullivan is a vile man who couldn't get a job anywhere except TalkTV. I think that's in the offing as well. What else have we got here? What an idiot Kevin O'Sullivan is. He hasn't done a day's hard work in his life. That could be true. Probably got his friends to do his homework and exams. That's
These
not
are
true.
bang on,
I
aren't
did
they?
not get my friends to do my exams. I cheated in them. That's fair enough, isn't it? It's a good one. Kevin O'Sullivan will spend the rest of his life coming to terms with the fact he was sacked from the Mirror and now has to churn out, well, I can't quite say that, turn out brown stuff like this to stay relevant whilst clinging on to his position as a weekend presenter on TalkTV. Fact! Deal with it, Kev. Hold these thoughts. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back. Time to talk about the Royals now. Planet Windsor. Let's talk about Andrew and Charles. I've got this feeling. Have you seen these stories lately that King Charles is sort of taking a load of money away from Andrew, so he can't afford the upkeep on his royal lodge down in Windsor? So, horror of horrors, he might have to move out of this palace and then move into a £5 million mews house in Mayfair. Right. It's tough at the top. But it strikes me that Charles doesn't like Andrew very much. Do you get that feeling?
It's a weird family, isn't it? Really seriously.
They are a strange family.
I wouldn't put anything past them. It's only... You see the version in the media, and then the great thing is when you speak to one of the royal correspondents, they'll always say, well, of course, you know, Charles, terrible temper on him, smashes windows, the whole... You think, what? And gradually this picture has emerged, because I didn't take much interest in the royal family till I worked in newspapers, when it's kind of forced on you. Yeah. And you see what they're really like, and you think, oh my God, absolute bunch of maniacs, some of them.
What do you think? I mean, do you think Charles hates Andrew?
Absolutely.
Everyone else hates him, so why not?
Well, of course he hates him. And the reason that he'll hate him is because third in line to the throne, he was at one stage, doesn't sweat, much better looking than old big-eared Charles, the king.
That's true.
So all of that to start with. And then the other thing I think that really galls Charles even though he went to study anthropology, I think it was, at Cambridge University at Trinity.
The least qualified person ever to get into Cambridge University.
But anyway, he got in there and he did all that. Meanwhile, Andrew, of course, who was the Queen's favourite, there is no doubt about that. So, of course, that would have gnarled Charles, is that when he went into the armed forces, of course, he served in the Falkland Islands as a proper person on proper missions, piloting those helicopters and everything else he did, and saw real action. And of course, Charles never did he? And in the end of it, do you remember the end of King Charles's career within the forces was when he crashed that plane?
Yeah.
And that was that. Out he came. So I think there's all of that. I think there was the other side of things that Charles obviously wasn't allowed to have the woman that he now has, that he wanted to spend the whole of his life with. Prince Andrew, in those earlier days with Fergie, and then before that with Stark, of course, that would be jealous of all of that because Stark was wonderful and what have you. And on it went. And then, of course, the other thing now is that not only has he let everybody down, he's basically spent all of the money on absolutely nothing. He's been outrageous. He should be certainly, many think, even taken to task again quite rightly for everything that happened with Epstein and with the Maxwells and everything like that. So I can understand completely why Charles can't stand him. I'd have actually shown him the door.
Yeah. Do you think, Ali, that Prince Andrew's judgment is possibly questionable?
Yes, it's a little bit questionable, isn't it?
It's time now for another commercial break.
Now that girl's wearing Harmony hairspray.
She's never wearing hairspray.
See? She's wearing Harmony hairspray.
But she couldn't be wearing hairspray.
Well, why didn't you ask her? Excuse me, Oh, new Harmony hairspray for soft hair. Harmony hairspray. Perhaps you should have asked the driver.
Harmony hairspray. Now for soft hair too. The gentle hairspray at a gentle price.
Well, that's a brand new advert, but it seems a bit old-fashioned to me.
It's counterintuitive. It's brilliant. It's postmodern. It's ironic.
The only
That guy's going to get arrested, isn't he, in the cab?
Well, no. The only fact that isn't sort of right about that now is that the cab was actually moving.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the black cab can't move anymore since Boris changed it all into cycle lanes and ruined the whole of the centre.
But you don't get any wolf whistling in TV commercials anymore, do you?
Or indeed real life.
No, because it's against the law.
Yeah.
Coppers think it's against the law. But why do they do that?
I think that's brilliant. It's funnier than anything I've seen on television in a long, long time. It wouldn't have been about 20 years ago, but the crackdown on anything that's unwoke has made that funny. I would like to see a comeback for that, just to see the reaction it would get.
Just put an advert out like that now.
What's the problem?
Yeah.
She's really pretty.
Is there a problem with that, though? I suppose is it a bit sexist or something? It is, isn't it?
Kev, yeah, a bit.
You know what, though,
Just a smidgen.
Yeah, it is.
She's a
hugely
speaking role there.
Hugely sexist.
She just appears, looks pretty, cycles off, no words.
Couldn't do it, though, of course, because you'd have to wear a helmet.
Yeah.
And, of course, that would ruin the hair anyway, wouldn't
Yeah,
Good point.
and then you wouldn't be able to see the Harmony hairspray.
Well, I think you do. You'd brake and stop and whip the helmet off and somebody go... And then you could do it.
Enough of Harmony hairspray. Let's have a look at some of the stories that are entertaining us tonight. Number one, upset mum's warning after accidentally eating heart-shaped Walker's crisp worth £100,000. This is a true story.
Walker's crisp, wherever it is, I'd splash that.
No, they made this sort of very rare packets of crisps, had this sort of heart-shaped crisp in it. And they tried to let all the consumers know that if you get one of these heart-shaped crisps and you bring them in, get £100,000. This lady didn't know. A supermarket worker, Dawn Sager, was enjoying a pack of Walker's Ready Salted Crisps before her last shift at the supermarket last week, and she scoffed them all down, including the heart-shaped £100,000 crisp, which means she doesn't get £100,000.
Good story.
Yeah.
Well, all I think about that is there wouldn't have been £100,000 to give her anyway, because they would give all their money to Gary Lineker.
We never mentioned him in the BBC, did we? Why are they paying him £1.25 million to talk about the offside rule?
To commentate on one sport.
Yeah.
He doesn't even do golf anymore. He tried it, but he's just a one sport man.
Yeah, it's just football.
You should be, if you're getting paid that money, you should be able to do about half a dozen, as all the best professionals like Jim Rosenthal could do.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about this story.
What? The £100,000?
No, I think it's very much Walker's needing something with the amount of different types of crisps that there are now on the market. And, you know, you read into that, the little shape and that. How do we know? I mean, how does anybody know that they're going to win 100,000? They don't tell you anywhere on any of these crisps.
I think it's up your way, Ali. I think it's in Edinburgh.
Too much journalism, Sagas. It's a story too good to check. Just whack it in.
Well, I think, well, OK, that's fine.
Yeah. Don't let the facts stand in the way of a good story.
You know,
don't over-check it.
Well, I'm not going to over-check it.
It's 5 o'clock. We need a splash.
So there we go.
That's what news editors always say.
Yeah.
Don't make too many calls.
One will do.
Don't knock this down.
That's probably too many.
Trust me. That's it for now. We'll be back in a second. In another life, if they didn't make bad TV, I would have been out of work. I was a TV columnist for the Sunday Mirror, and we have with us Britain's greatest living TV columnist from The Sun, Ali Ross. So he needs bad TV just like I needed bad TV. And we're going to talk about some, one or two programmes that kind of really cross the line in terms of terribleness. And right off the bat, we're going to go across the channel, not even across the channel, across the Atlantic to see one of Hollywood's finest ever sitcoms. Of course, I'm talking about Heil, Honey, I'm Home. But let's have a look.
Heil, honey, I'm home.
Heil, honey, me.
What did I do now? Oh, tonight you were making schnitzel. What a joke. You must be real mad at me, honey. I'm a very, very bad Hitler.
So the idea of this, is a high-concept sitcom back in the 60s where this was at a time when, you know, Nazis escaping Germany were still quite in the news, you know, because they were constantly being found in places like Paraguay. So someone in Hollywood, Tinseltown, had this great idea that what if a bunch of Nazis, including Adolf Hitler, look at us talking about Nazis and Adolf Hitler. You're not allowed to do that anymore because it's not very woke. Don't even mention Hitler or Nazis because it's horrible. Well, we're doing it. And this is a sitcom, Heil, Honey, I'm Home. So the concept was that Hitler and a few of his relatives and his wife there, to escape Germany after the war, went and hid in Californian suburbia. They lived their life, as you can see. So it could happen. You would have thought that if you're trying to sort of pretend you're not Nazis, maybe not dress up in the uniform, but there you are. Good show, yeah?
Yeah. Is it on to its 20th series now?
Yeah, it's still going.
Is there a spin-off?
Yeah.
That was Eva Braun, right? I'm not imagining
I think it was supposed to be...
That was Mrs. Hitler.
Yeah, Mrs. Hitler.
Yeah, OK. I can see how that got on screen, weirdly. You can imagine it taking over the meeting. And basically, it would have seemed like a good idea to pitch. You're pulling a face.
I am pulling a face.
But I'd like to think at some point before I actually press play on the opening night, someone would have gone, maybe not.
I know this might make me seem as if I sort of lack a moral compass.
But you do lack a moral compass, Kevin.
I knew you were going to say that. But I actually think it's a brilliant idea. And it's a real shame that wokery has quashed any other programme like that ever being made.
I actually went this week to watch Spitting Image Live, which I would recommend for everybody.
good.
It's at Birmingham Rep at the moment. It's going to go round the country. It is 2.5 hours of belly laughs.
Okay, great.
And
I bet it gets away with more live than it does on telly.
I don't think any of it would get past any censor on television from even before the curtains have opened.
Now, I wonder if this next programme would pass the modern test. It's a few years back, not many. You'll remember it, Ali, and I do, because it was a staple of my column for several weeks while it was on. Do you remember I Wanna Marry Harry?
12 American girls searching for love have moved into an English castle to meet an ordinary guy who is pretending to be a prince. Welcome to the fairy tale.
There are a lot of pretty girls there. You could say way out of my league, but for who I'm pretending to be, it's perfect. American girls are very forward. You've got a naughty little smile.
I don't know if the Queen would approve.
Come now, right now, please.
I've never seen anything like that in my life before. But the only thing that I would be fascinated to see is what did the winner look like?
Well, they were quite good-looking girls.
No, I know that, but I mean, you know, that for me, not from that point of view.
Not
but
like
from
Meghan, I don't think.
Well, exactly. That's what I was coming to. But no, that one passed me by as well. I'm sorry, Ali.
It's only people like me and Ali watch these programmes because we had to.
I could do with that.
What time of day was that on what channel?
Well, it was like 9 o'clock on a Channel 4 or something like that, wasn't it?
I think it was a bit. It got later and later.
Yeah, it was like 3 in the morning by the last episode. No one watching whatsoever.
Our viewing figures are Kevin and Ali.
Yeah, that's right. Only critics watching it. Yeah. It was a brilliant show, though. It's because it's a bit like Geordie Shore. If you had nothing else to write about, you could always watch Geordie Shore.
There was a rash of these kind of shows. I remember The Bachelor was out.
The Bachelor.
Oh, there were loads of things like that.
Gavin Henson, and that was a great television series. Once again, I think we were the only two people watching
just
it.
you and me watching it. Now, I Want to Marry Harry, based on this ludicrous premise that this bunch of American girls wouldn't realise that someone who doesn't look at all like Harry isn't Harry. Another ludicrous premise, a bunch of people put into a spacecraft to believe that they were touring the universe in the outer limits. This was a show presented by Johnny Vaughan. It was called Space Cadets.
You've been on board Earth Orbiter 1 for the last 5 days. Congratulations, you've successfully taken part in a TV first, but perhaps not in the way you've been thinking. Mission!
Now, all of them clearly realised after the first second this is not a real spaceship, but they pretended that it was.
They all said it's expecting takeoff to be a bit bumpier. I've seen it on the telly.
Well, how long did they
There's fumes and everything. They were there,
Weeks.
They were there a couple of... And it had to be suspended one night filming because a moth got into the studio. And even these klutzes didn't believe that at 100,000 feet, a moth would suddenly flutter across the window.
Now, this is also a very political show. We want to talk about politics. And I've always been interested in party political broadcasts, you know, which ones are good, which ones work. And I think this one is particularly effective. It's from America, part of a campaign. Let's have a look.
I'm Joni Ernst. I grew up castrating hogs on an Iowa farm. So when I get to Washington, I'll know how to cut pork.
Joni Ernst, mother, soldier, conservative.
My parents taught us to live within our means. It's time to force Washington to do the same. To cut wasteful spending, repeal Obamacare, and balance the budget. I'm Joni Ernst, and I approve this message because Washington's full of big spenders. Let's make them squeal.
If you were in this country, in Britain, you probably wouldn't sort of kick off your Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak. They probably wouldn't kick off their party political broadcasts by saying, "I'm Keir Starmer. I grew up castrating hogs." It's unlikely, isn't it?
No, you get...
It's an unusual start.
My dad was a toolmaker.
Yeah.
So I'm still working class.
Yeah. I'm so... my dad was a toolmaker.
I feel your...
Owned the company.
I feel your pain, workers.
Employed 300 people. Yeah. Unusual.
Yeah, I don't mind that. That grabbed my attention.
Yeah, I do.
The whole castration thing. But I'm of an age to remember when Labour got Hugh Hudson involved, and suddenly there were these big production numbers, and it made Britain look like a land of milk and honey. It wasn't the intended purpose of it, and everyone just thought, well, I'm not voting for him then. There wasn't nothing wrong with this country. It looked marvellous.
Well, guys, it's been a fantastic evening. I can't imagine two people I'd rather have shared it with. So thank you very much to The Sun's brilliant TV critic, Ali Ross. Read his column in The Sun every Friday, best read of the week. Mark Saggers, of course, in charge of the Sunday Night Club on TalkTV. You can catch him here, there and everywhere. It's been great, guys. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Back in 1963, when I was in my early 40s, they made a film called It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Like most Hollywood comedies, it wasn't very funny, but it suggested that as we lurched into the thoroughly modern swinging 60s, this wacky world of ours really was going crazy. Well, compared to now, those long ago days were a veritable bastion of sanity. You want mad? Let's shut the whole world down to not really stop anyone catching a virus no more lethal than the flu. And when that doesn't work, do it again and again and again, and then realise that we've inflicted lasting damage on the global economy. So, closing all businesses and ordering all workers to stay at home and not do their jobs wasn't the greatest idea? God, who knew? Not, apparently, our political leaders who, egged on by evangelical model-making scientists, went about these disastrous lockdowns with pious enthusiasm, as if they were unquestionably right. You want mad? Let's tell little kids there are more than 100 genders and they can choose anyone they want. Let's tell them that the biological sex they were born as doesn't really matter. Just say what it is you want to be and hey presto, you're it. Let's tell them that they can destroy the English language by demanding to be addressed as them or they, even though there's only one of them. What could possibly go wrong? You want mad? Decide unequivocally and without definitive scientific proof that nasty humans are destroying the planet and embark on an international project to cost us a fortune and take us back to the Stone Age. If you live in Britain, producer of just 1% of global pollution, convince yourself that you not flying to Spain for your holiday and shelling out a fortune for something called carbon net zero will somehow save the Earth from destruction. Listen to dozy politicians droning on about renewables and sustainability as if their energy policies weren't utter virtue signalling claptrap. If you live in China, producer of 28% of global pollution, enjoy your cheap energy while your dear leaders completely ignore the stultifying green orthodoxy and laugh at the rest of us desperately trying to assuage our environmental guilt. If you want mad, I give you the delusional jackasses at the helm of the good ship Britain who genuinely believe that over in Beijing, Xi Jinping suffers sleepless nights because we've got cycle lanes and he's building hundreds of new coal-fueled power stations to go with the 1,000 or so he's already got. Reality check. Oh, Xi could not care less. You want mad? Stand by and do nothing as thousands of foreigners illegally sail across the English Channel and demand to stay here. Give them pizzas, 45 quid a week, free accommodation in luxury hotels, free food, free legal advice, and tell them not to worry. They can stick around indefinitely. Start rewriting books, ban words like black, white and fat. Make it a crime to call someone nasty names. Get a police force that doesn't investigate crime crimes, but very much does dance the Macarena. Get a load of law-breaking coppers whose only knowledge of crimes is the one they've committed. Worship our hopeless health service as if it's the envy of the world when it's nothing of the sort. Let the million-plus people employed by the NHS complain that 200 billion quid a year is nowhere near enough while paying hundreds of pointless, non-medical middle managers massive six-figure salaries. Balmy and bonkers. We shouldn't be putting up with this moronic inferno of insanity, but we do. Why? Everywhere you look, idiots making deranged decisions that make no sense. I could go on and on, because when the history books look back on this swirling mass of absurdity in which we struggle to get by, the past few ludicrous years will be seen as the time the world went stark staring mad. Forget 1963, this is 2023, and it truly is a mad, 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 mad world. Thank you and good night. What just happened?